Most people, once they flush the toilet or water runs down the sink, they have no idea where it goes, but it has to be treated before it can be returned to the receiving stream, whether it's a river or lake or whatever it may be. So my role as a wastewater treatment plant coordinator is, from day-to-day aspects, I order chemicals, I make sure that we're fully staffed. It's a mandatory requirement that we have staffing for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, holidays, weekends. I also will take any samples that have been run by the laboratory, and I will evaluate those, make process changes or improvements based on that information. I'll pass on relative information to my supervisor. If there's a spill, an overflow or something like that, make sure it gets passed higher up. Some of the challenges we face at a treatment facility, one of the things that come to mind, we've had a lot of rain in the past week or so. That was preceded by a fairly significant drought. We do have a little I&I issue. I&I is influent infiltration. You'll have groundwater that gets into the collection system. It could happen in several different ways. Some systems are designed to accept stormwater. Sometimes you have creeks or streams that rise, and that height rise will then infiltrate into the collection system, either through a manhole that's not sealed or maybe a break in a line. One of the other things is this side of Fayetteville seems to be growing quite a lot. We're in the works for an expansion. That will be helpful in the future to keep pace with the growing demand of the population. What you can flush is not always what should go into the sewer system. If it's not biodegradable, we can't treat it. You know, one of the things we do is we remove all the sand, silt, because that's not going to be able to be broken down in the plant. Same thing with any sort of rags, any cotton materials. That gets screened out early in the process so it doesn't foul the pump or cause any issues mechanically. So basically oils, grease, fats, rags, things like that, it would be very helpful to us if it does not get into the sewer system. If there's anything that's not supposed to be in the sewer system, it could potentially cause an overflow. We have multiple redundancies. If a piece of equipment goes down, there's typically at least one or two others to back it up. So what we'll do is we will cycle through that equipment. We try to keep our run times more or less similar. That way one piece of equipment's not getting more run time, being abused essentially, because there's equipment out here that runs constantly. Whether it's your influence screws or your blowers, there has to be one of those, if not two, on at all times. So we'll cycle through those on a monthly basis to keep our run times more or less the same, trying to extend the life of that equipment. On top of that, we have a preventative maintenance program that our maintenance department sees up. Basically, it's routine oil changes. Aside from operations that sees any issues with the equipment, there's a schedule that things are being maintained on, greased, lubricated, rotated, whatever, to try to get the most out of the equipment that we have on hand. Before we can treat the wastewater, it has to get to the plant. So there's a multitude of lift stations and collection systems that bring the wastewater to us. So once the wastewater makes its way through the collection system, the first step at our plant is it comes up the influence screws. Once it comes through the influence screws, it passes through the bar screens, which removes any sort of floatable debris. After it passes through the bar screens, we have a grit chamber that separates out the sand and the silt. Once it leaves the influence structure, it gets split into 5 aeration basins where the biological activity begins. Your raw influent will be mixed with the return activated sludge, which comes off of the bottom of the clarifiers. Once it makes its way through the aeration basins, it goes back into the mixed liquor channel into one of the 3 clarifiers. Once the sludge settles out, the clear water makes its way out of the top of the clarifiers. The chlorine's then added. It makes its way through the sand filters. From there, it makes its way out to the river where it's dechlorinated and passed on to the end user. So one thing we need to remember is the water that we treat, once it leaves our plant, there is a downstream user. So we want to produce a quality effluent because we know that water is going to be reused by someone else downstream. The water that we return to the river is actually cleaner than the river water itself.